Nice to see you again. Thank you for being here. Your current budget, by my calculations, is $48.3 billion. Is that right?
The budget request is for $37.8 billion, the FY25 budget, and that would constitute a 3.5% increase over.
But with mandatory spending, your budget's 48.3. Is that right?
I don't have the number for including mandatory, but I'll certainly be able to get back to you for that.
Well, let's take out mandatory.
Yeah.
Your discretionary budget right now is $37.8 billion.
The FY25 request is for 37.8.
That's not what I'm asking.
I'm sorry?
What's your current budget?
Well, it's 3.5% less than that, so I can take out my calculator and do the math, but I don't have it in front of me.
All right, well, let me put it another way. You're asking for an extra $467 million, is that right?
In the increased amount of money that we're asking for, that's approximately right, yes.
Okay. To your knowledge, in the past, let's say 40 years, has the Department of Justice ever come before Congress and said, we don't need any more? We're going to make it with what we've got in light of the fiscal circumstances in the country?
I normally wouldn't want to speculate, but in this case, I can't imagine that the Department of Justice, facing increasing threats every year, violent crime, threats to our national security, drug trafficking threats, would...
Is that a no?
I don't know the answer, but I think it would be surprising if the department ever asked for less money. I think that would be not responsible.
You talked in a little bit in your testimony, General, about guns, and you've been very outspoken about the need for more gun control. With respect, and if you don't mind me asking, do you own a gun?
I don't.
Okay. Have you ever fired a gun?
Many times.
Okay. Do you have 24-hour security?
I do.
Okay. Let me ask you about fentanyl, because that's a huge problem, and I know you're worried about it, as are we. And we've, of course, got a problem with the precursor chemicals coming into Mexico to the Mexican cartels who manufacture the fentanyl and send it into the United States. Isn't a big part of the problem that if you took the Mexican drug cartels and turned them upside down and shook them, that President Lopez Obrador would fall out of their pockets?
Well, I'll leave the metaphor aside. The department has said that we do not have an investigation of the President of Mexico.
Do you think President of Mexico is our friend?
We need cooperation from Mexico. Mexico has been somewhat cooperative with respect to our fight against the cartels, not as helpful as I wish they were, but without their cooperation, we can't be successful in destroying the cartels.
Why wouldn't the president go to President Lopez Obrador and say, no offense, but the fentanyl problem is killing Americans, the illegal immigration problem is hurting Americans. If you don't cooperate with us, and he clearly hasn't been, and he's not afraid of us, we're going to implement tariffs on Mexico until you do.
I think there are many ways to encourage cooperation from another country.
But that would do it, wouldn't it?
I don't know whether that would do it or whether...
You don't think that would get his attention?
I am not a diplomat. I'm not a foreign affairs strategist. I know we need their support and cooperation.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that would be positive or negative.
So we just ask politely.
Well, we do more than that, but
Right.
considerably more than that.
Let me ask
I don't know the answer to your
Okay.
high-level
Let me ask you one last
strategy
question in my 14 seconds. I've been dying to ask you this question.
How long have you been dying to ask me this question?
Long time. Long time. Mr. Hunter Biden did not pay taxes on $1 million in 2014 and 2015. And he deducted payments from his income tax for personal expenses when he did file. For hookers, for a Lamborghini, for strip clubs, for sex clubs, for porn website memberships. Why did the Department of Justice let the statute of limitations run?
As you well know,
So
Senator.
you can't prosecute?
As you well know, Senator, that investigation is being conducted by Mr. Weiss, who was appointed by President Trump to be the U.S. Attorney in Delaware. Much of the investigation they're talking about occurred during the previous administration under Mr. Weiss. Mr. Weiss has continued his investigations. He's now a special counsel. He will issue a report which
So are
will
you saying
explain
it's
those,
Trump's fault?
which will explain. No, I don't know whether there's fault or not. Mr. Weiss will explain this in his report.
But we can't. Mr. Hunter Biden walks free on not paying taxes on $1 million from 2014 and 15 because the Department of Justice let it happen, right?
Again, I'm not going to comment on decisions made in a pending investigation. In the end, Mr. Weiss will issue a report. I will provide the report to Congress. You will be able to question Mr. Weiss as to his reasoning, and he will be able to defend his reasoning.
Would you come with Mr. Weiss when he does that?
I'm not going to know the intricacies of Mr. Weiss' investigation. There would be no point. It's Mr. Weiss who's responsible for this investigation.
But you were head of the Department of Justice.
Yes, and I've appointed him as special counsel so that he can independently investigate this matter.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Senator Kennedy. Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Judge, for being here. I appreciate your service.
I tell just to alert the members, and Senator Cruz is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, welcome. Thank you. As you know, as I observed at your confirmation hearing, you had built a long record on the Federal Court of Appeals and a reputation of being relatively nonpartisan. And so I had hopes that your tenure as Attorney General would continue that record. I have to say I'm deeply disappointed in what the last 2 years have shown. In my judgment, the Department of Justice has been politicized to the greatest extent I've ever seen in this country. And it has done a discredit to the Department of Justice, to the FBI, and to the administration of law in this country. Let me start with a simple question. General Garland, is it a federal crime to protest outside of a judge's home with the intent of influencing that judge as to a pending case?
The answer to that is yes, but I also want to at least respond to your characterization of the department, which
Sure.
I vigorously disagree with. I believe the men and women of the department pursue their work every single day in a nonpartisan and an appropriate
General
way.
Garland, there are thousands of men and women who do that, and I'll tell you, I hear from prosecutors at the Department of Justice, I hear from agents at the FBI who are angry that it is treated as the enforcement arm for the DNC instead of upholding the law in a fair and even-handed manner. So you are right. There are thousands of men and women that are doing the job, but it is the political leadership that you're responsible for. So you just said, yes, it's a crime to protest at the home of a judge. Same goes for jurors, by the way, with the intent of influencing a case. But in the wake of the leak of the Dobbs decision, when rioters descended on the homes of 6 Supreme Court justices, night after night after night, you did nothing. The department did nothing. When extremist groups like Ruth Sent Us and Jane's Revenge openly organized campaigns of harassment at the homes of justices, you sat on your hands. When these same groups posted online information about where the justices worship, or their home addresses, or where their kids went to school, you again sat on your hands and did nothing. Your failure to act to protect the safety of the justices and their families was an obvious product of political bias. You agree with Roe versus Wade, you disagree with the Dobbs decision, and the Department of Justice under this president was perfectly happy to refuse to enforce the law and allow threats of violence. And as you know, those threats finally materialized with Nicholas Roski, a 26-year-old man from California who traveled across the country, was arrested outside the home of Justice Kavanaugh, armed with a handgun, a knife, and burglary tools. And he said he came there to kill Justice Kavanaugh because he was enraged by the leaked opinion. Now, of course, you're prosecuting that individual for attempted murder, but did you bring even a single case to enforce this law, or did the Department of Justice decide this law doesn't apply if it's harassing justices for an opinion we don't like?
When the Dobbs draft was leaked, I did something no Attorney General in the history of the department had ever done before. For the first time in history, I ordered United States Marshals 24/7 to defend every residence of every justice.
Well, Garland, as a judge, you're familiar with asking counsel to answer a question.
I am
Has the Department of Justice enforced this statute? Have you brought a single case against any of these protesters threatening the justices under 18 U.S.C. Section 1507? Have you brought even one?
Senator, you asked me whether I sat on my hands, and quite the opposite. I sent 70 United States Marshals.
Let me try again.
To defend, and
has the Department of Justice brought even a single case under this statute? It's a yes/no question. It's not a give a speech on the other things you did.
The job of the United States Marshals is to defend the lives
So the answer is no.
Is to defend the lives of the justices, and that's our number one priority. They have.
Why are you unwilling to say no? The answer is no. You know it's no. I know it's no. Everyone in this hearing room knows it's no. You're not willing to answer a question. Have you brought a case under this statute? Yes or no?
As far as I know, we haven't, and what we have done is defended the lives of the justices with over 70 U.S. Marshals.
How do you decide which criminal statutes the DOJ enforces and which one it doesn't?
The United States Marshals know that they have full authority.
I recognize you want to give a separate speech.
No, I don't want to give
How do you decide which statutes you enforce and which ones you don't?
The Marshals on scene make that determination in light of the priority of defense.
The Marshals do not make a determination over whether to prosecute. You, the Attorney General, make a determination, and you spent 20 years as a judge, and you're perfectly content with justices being afraid for their children's lives, and you did nothing to prosecute it. Let's shift to another area.
Can I answer the question?
No, you cannot. You have refused to answer the question.
I am answering your question. The Attorney General does not decide whether to arrest.
How did you choose not to enforce this statute?
The Marshals on scene.
Marshals don't make that decision.
They do make the decision of whether to make an arrest.
Prosecute someone? No, they don't.
If they make
Marshals do not have prosecution.
If they make an arrest, then it goes to the Marshals.
Let's change topics because our time is limited. We've also seen across the country violent attacks as pregnancy centers by similar left-wing terrorist groups, including one graffiti of a firebomb building said Jane was here. There have been attacks all over the country, and yet the Department of Justice has not brought these violent criminals to justice. You contrast that. If you're a violent criminal and you attack a crisis pregnancy center, that is not a priority in the Biden Department of Justice. Contrast that to Mark Houck, who's a pro-life activist. He's a sidewalk counselor. And he had an altercation with someone who allegedly interfered with his son's personal space and threatened his son, and he pushed him. Now, in an ordinary world, pushing someone would be maybe a simple misdemeanor assault, but not under the Biden Department of Justice. If you're a pro-life activist, what can you expect? Well, in this instance, according to Mr. Houck's wife, 24 agents clad in body armor and ballistic helmets and shields and a battering ram showed up at his house pointing rifles at his family. Why do you send 24 agents in body armor to arrest a sidewalk counselor who happens to be pro-life, but you don't devote resources to prosecute people who are violently firebombing crisis pregnancies?
It is a priority of the department to prosecute and investigate and find the people who are doing those firebombings. They are doing it at night and in secret. And we have found one group which we did prosecute.
You found one. How many have there been? How many attacks?
There have been a lot. And if you have any information specifically as to who those people are, we would be glad. We would be glad to have that.
Did you personally authorize 20 agents going to Mr. Houck's house? And he offered to turn himself in through counsel, but you didn't want that. the Department of Justice wanted to make a show of it. Did you personally authorize it? And do you want to apologize to Mrs. Houck and her 7 children for being terrorized?
The decisions about how to do that are made at the level of the FBI agents on scene.
Did you know about it?
I did not know about it until the way you're describing it, and my understanding is the FBI disagrees with that description.
Was it a mistake?
Senator's time has expired. I'm going to allow the witness to respond to any of the questions that were asked.
Was it a mistake?
I'm going to chair the committee, Senator. I'm sorry you're not.
You said you'd allow him to respond. I repeated the question I asked, which is, was it a mistake to send 20 agents to arrest him at the crack of dawn?
You had your time and more
You just
than
said
any-
you're going to allow him to respond. You just said, I'm going to allow him to respond to the question, so I repeated the question. Was it a mistake?
You
That
asked
was the pending
questions you want to
question.
ask. I'll ask the questions I want.
That's the question I had already asked.
Well,
You just said you'd let him respond.
I'm going to let him respond right
Good.
now. Please don't interrupt him. Thank you.
The decisions about how to do tactical arrests are made by the FBI agents in the field. The FBI has publicly stated that it disagrees with the description you gave of what happened in that example. That's the best I can answer.
At this point, we're going to